Dude, you're gonna kill me. I didn't hit record. Just kidding. Have a great week. Nate, man, another episode of Live Good DyNasty. How you doing today, man?
Doing great, dude. Doing great. Just we're jumping into the craziness of redraft season. Now we've been talking dynasty for so long. I'm excited because this is when I gotta like break down my dynasty brain and get it out of my head because I'm going
Yeah,
through all these redraft drafts right now.
yeah. I
So
tend to myself in Dynasty mindset for so long. It takes a little bit, as you could tell from like that mayhem draft mayhem that we did the other week, where I was so rookie focused. I'm like, oh, this is my rookie draft right now. By the end of it,
yeah, yeah.
it was not as strong as it should have been. So it was a really good exercise. But today, that is what we're focusing on. We're focusing on a little bit of redraft, just taking a moment to pause and think about that, as we need to get our own minds right, and specifically around redraft draft and different strategies that people use, and different tips that we have and tools that we have that we really like. But again, this is Live Good DyNasty, and we are well on our way to our very modest goal of 100 subscribers. We do love all the interaction in the comments and everything. And we love the fact that we're getting closer and closer. I think we're almost at 50, so halfway there. But if you want to be part of that very modest journey to get us to 100 subscribers, it always keeps us motivated, more than the subscribers or likes or any of that, even just that conversation and letting us know what strategy you're using in the draft. Use those comments, though, when we like having that conversation with you. But enough about all that. We want to get into today's episode, and we're going to start with draft tips. So I'm going to hand that back over to Nate. And what kind of draft tips do you have? What do you use when you're going into it?
There's a couple of things, right? One, we're going to talk about a bunch of strategies today, but you always have to remember to stay flexible with what you're doing. No matter what strategy you walked in with, what your plan was, someone's going to go grab Josh Allen number 2 overall, which literally happened in my redraft, my first redraft of the season this past week. A quarter that someone took in a single quarterback league, Josh Allen number 2 overall, and somehow in that
Wow.
draft, Puka Nakua fell all the way to 19. So there's just all kinds of crazy, weird things were happening in that draft. So stay flexible and adapt to whatever's happening in your flow. Especially if you don't know your league mates very well, you may have to adjust and adapt very quickly to whatever is happening. So make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on around you. And kind of lock in step with that. Another huge thing for me is making sure you're paying attention to the positional runs, right? You can get locked into your strategy, whether it's going to be some of the strategies we're talking about later today. And you might not realize that 13 quarterbacks have come off the board and you don't have one yet. So make sure you're paying attention to when those
Yeah.
tight ends or those quarterbacks start running off the board way earlier than maybe you have them in your ADP or on your big board. And make sure if you really care and you're not punching that position, you're going to need to go back, jump in there, and maybe stray from your strategy a little bit to go grab Jaden Daniels number 10 or
Yeah.
11 off the board before the misses.
Sure.
What else you got?
Well, I think just to add on to that, the being flexible kind of goes along with that, making sure that you're looking at what's actually unfolding on the draft board itself and looking for those runs. But knowing your league mates and going, watching what they already have drafted, take a look at like what their needs are currently. To if you need, are you deciding between a couple different positions, or if you really need to jump on that run, or if you can wait till it turns back around, because there's gambles that you do within every round, to see which guys you might want somebody a little bit more, but you think they might be able to fall to that next round. But take a look at what your league mates have already and what they need, and take that into account, and be willing to reach and discount that if there's really somebody that you're going to be really upset about missing out on, if you don't get them. But part of that fun is that gamble that you have every single round throughout it. So I would agree 100%. Just make sure you're flexible, kind of go with the draft. And that goes with what we're going to be talking about today, the different draft strategies that people have. You have to be willing to throw that out if you notice that everybody's on your strategy. The reason they kind of change over time, other than the fact that football itself changes and we have to adapt to it, because the popularity of a system might change over time. So you might have everybody coming in with the same hero RB, which we'll talk about strategy. Well, maybe that's when you switch it up because the value is really at wide receiver at this portion of the draft because of how people acted, or maybe running back in the middle rounds because people have moved on to wide receiver and acting this other strategy. I would also say, like, so I saw somebody post mock drafts are detrimental and you should not do them. And I was almost offended. First of all, they're just fun. So even if it was bad for me, I'm going to take that pill. but I think they can be really helpful. But where I do see the problem when you're doing too many mock drafts is then you're just drafting to ADP, and some of these guys will go a round or two earlier or later, depending on your league mates. So I think before any draft, my tip is to, after you've done mock drafts for that within whatever platform you're in, do a manual one where you're selecting every player from the first 6 or so rounds, knowing the person that is in that place, so that you can better predict it. You know which players in your draft, their tendencies, if you've played with them for enough years, or if there's a wild card, you might not, but you have that wild card information. Like, this could go either way, but that really helps you prepare more for each individual draft if you really want to be able to take advantage and dominate it, and have to be less flexible and make less adjustments during the draft itself.
Yeah, I like that. And with the mock drafts too, especially pay attention to the different host sites that are out there, like whether you're drafting Yahoo or Sleeper or ESPN. I would recommend doing a couple of mock drafts in each so you can see where the different people are landing, because different personalities, different types of people use different apps and all that kind of stuff. You do it at different times of day, because if you are up at 2 a.m. mock drafting, that's a different crowd than might be mock drafting at 12 in the
Totally. And I think that this next piece here, I think this is my biggest one, is use tiers. So a lot of the different, and I'll throw in my like favorite. I have a lot of different tools that I really like. I don't like too much of the, like, I've found that as digital as I am, I really like a pen and paper to go along with me in the draft itself. So I don't usually use like, I think Fantasy Pros has that My Draft Genie or whatever it's called, but it can be helpful, and I used that for a couple of years just to kind of get my hands on some of it and get a handle on it. So that's possible, and that's there. But I like their playbook and their ranking system because they break it up by tier. So tier-based drafting, for the record, and just the clear understanding, tier-based system is being able to put wide receivers or running backs, whatever the position is, into tiers themselves, so that you know that with the ADP itself, so you can see like this person is in the 5th round, but in the same tier as this person in the 3rd round. So maybe I'm going to wait and see if that person can drop. Or, hey, this is the last person in this position in this tier, and then there's a pretty big jump off to that next tier. But this running back over here in this other position, there's 5 more people I'm fine with taking. And that might be there for me on the next turn. So it kind of helps make those decisions when you're deciding between the two. So Fantasy Pros, I like their stuff a lot. I think what I gear towards, another podcast, my favorite podcast, Fantasy Footballers, they have the UDK, the Ultimate Draft Kit, and I think that's got tons of great information. The ranking that they have within it uses that tier based too. So I kind of take both and make my own version of what I really prefer. But I think that's the biggest tip when using tools itself, is to make sure that you're still coming up with, you use that as a kind of a foundation, and then you tweak and make your own adjustments and put your own thought into it to get your final ranking in tiers.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think we already talked about this a little bit, or maybe we didn't, but I think the last thing for me is avoid the temptation to draft tight ends and quarterbacks too early. And I think this year, more than any other year, I can't think of a time, and we talked about this in previous episodes, where the tight end position and even the quarterback positions are actually so deep that you can wait. You probably feel even more comfortable than you have in past years. So this is a hard conversation maybe 2 years ago when you either had to get Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews or just forget about the position. Right. And so like you were tempted to go grab one of those guys in round 3, round 4 or whatever. But with the lineup that you have, I'm okay going and grabbing an Evan Ingram later rounds, or I'm grabbing David Njoku in later rounds, if I can
Mm-hmm.
stack up wide receiver and running back pretty well early on. If I can get all of those positions, all my flex positions filled up, I'm okay waiting on tight end and quarterback. And I think we need to just make sure that we get people thinking that same way. Or you know what, go ahead and draft all those tight ends and on quarterbacks early so that I can scoop up the flex folks I want.
Yeah, I would say with tight ends and running backs, it's like if you're gonna choose, if you do one early, don't do both early is the main thing. And then because you don't want to be too weak at the others, but it also, I think it depends on size of your league. I'm way more okay with reaching for in a 10 team versus 12 because, well, then you're gonna just have more people fall into the later rounds anyways that are quality. So I think it's okay to reach a little bit earlier on those, or maybe do both the quarterback and running back. But for either position, for every position, but especially those onesie positions like quarterback and tight end, just have what I'm gonna try this out on the fly, but I think I'm gonna call it my ripcord, like my ripcord player for every position. Like you're going in there, you have a few people that you'd prefer. They go a little earlier than you want, and you have one last player that is at the end of that tier that you would want, that you choose. Do you want to pull the ripcord or not? And just grab that guy and start that position a little earlier than you wanted to.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that term. We might coin that.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google it afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm gonna laugh very hard if it's like a normal thing people say.
A ripcord player. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
We'll have to utilize that for sure.
Going forward though, unless there's anything, do you want to throw anything else out there that you like to consider going in before we get into our main strategies?
No, that's it. This is silly, but when we think about just draft tips, remember, and I've said this before, go in there and have fun. Like this again, if you've got a guy that you're going to be bummed you're going to miss on, grab him around early. Like,
yeah,
just go grab your guy. Like we've had this conversation before. This is a season long game that you're going to be playing. Go grab the guys that you want. Within reason, right? Don't grab Josh Allen number 2 overall in a single quarterback league while you're wearing your Buffalo Bills shirt. Hopefully, I'm hoping you watch this podcast because you know I'm talking to you. But yeah, I just wanted to say, like, go grab your guy if you want. But that's it. Take a look at the example strategies.
Let's wrap that up like in a broader strategy too, other than, because I agree, just go get your guy, so you can have fun and root for him all year. But I would put a kind of like, to put a bow on it, just don't be completely bound by ADP. Because the ADP that is listed there, it might be different than a completely different platform or your own, more importantly. So if you have something, the ADP is only the judge of if you think you might be able to wait around to get that person or 2 rounds to get that person. But if you think they really should be up there and you don't know why they're not, or there's last minute changes like these cuts or people being added and ADP hasn't adjusted yet, don't wait to jump in early if you feel like they really actually are at this level, because you might have savvier and smarter league mates than you're giving them credit for.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it for our tips and tricks no tricks, just tips for our draft and our redraft strategy. I think the first one that we covered was the one to really focus on: be water, be flexible, change it up, and consider the following draft strategies. Do you want to take that first one? We're going to go into our draft strategies, the broad ones that you may have heard a little bit before, and some of them are dinosaurs, some of them are gaining in popularity.
Speaking of dinosaurs, so this first strategy we're going to talk about is the one that probably just didn't have a name when we used to do it, but it's the 0 wide receiver strategy. This is the old school mentality of making sure you got your running backs in place. This was highly popular before the popularity of PPR leagues came into play. This was huge, especially for the old school game, when we were a lot more focused into the running back position. So prioritizing those running backs early, and other positions early, waiting on that wide receiver position, like waiting for it down the line. Wasn't going to be as important. It's very hard to predict. You didn't have as many elite wide receivers unless you're talking about Megatron. Back in the day, like you just had the ball getting slung around a lot, and it was very unpredictable. So the summary of this, you would be drafting your running backs, possibly a tight end or a QB early, and waiting to the middle to late rounds to go get your wide receivers. So just thinking about it that way, I remember like going into drafts 10 years ago, going like picks 1 through 10 were all running backs. Like everyone in the league was just making sure they got their starting RB1. Most folks tried to grab an RB2 and then thought about wide receivers later. So super common back in the day. Do you see a situation where you would be utilizing this in today's world?
Yeah, I think everything that we talk about today is going to be one that I will utilize given the right situation. Specifically, like if I feel like other positions are the ones people are attacking, other strategies, then I always want to zag when people are zigging, right?
Yeah.
So zero wide receiver strategy, I think that is definitely when I entered in 12 years ago into fantasy football.
Yeah.
That's what you had to do. And it was, my first 3, 4, and a couple, sometimes 5 picks was running back. And then you looked at wide receiver. And the approach has changed. There's far less running backs that are worth giving up on those wide receivers for. And there are far more wide receivers that can make up the difference for not having a strong running back, which is why around 8 years ago, I feel like, throwing it out randomly, a new strategy started popping up. What is zero running back strategy? That's the one where all these troublemakers started with zero running back strategy, where they waited and just drafted wide receivers. You could usually fit in one of those onesie twosies, sometimes both positions of the tight end and quarterback, and you're dominating in those. And the idea is you're dominating in running back or wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback. You have the ability to, and then you can get those weaker later round running backs. And that was really the start of a change that I think added just more options for people to be able to not just follow this prior zero wide receiver strategy. It just flipped it on its head. And it was there because the opportunity was there, because so many people are doing one thing and you could do the other to be successful. And then there were now some more powerful ones that could get you through a 5 or 6 rounds where people were only focused on that other position.
Yeah.
And I think with zero running back strategy, you're really looking for like rounds 5 through 7. Then you start looking at running backs. You're looking for those lower tier or backups with high upside, or maybe rookies.
Yeah, rookies or folks that you with your laser eye, if you're paying attention, and a lot of folks are saying this is going to be a committee, but you're paying attention to the preseason and realize that maybe Devin Singletary is someone that you're looking at and no one's watching because he's playing for the Giants. But he's fallen way back into the seventh round.
Great example.
Yeah, so like those great places to go. And I think a lot of this comes either with zero wide receiver or zero running back. It's really dependent on your draft position as well, right? I'd be way more comfortable going zero wide receiver if I was pick 4 and was able to get Brees, and then I was able to come back around and grab someone like Kyron. And they were for some reason still available, right? If the draft board fell to me that way and an elite running back was there in round 2 and I got 2 running backs to start the draft, I might go that route. Whereas with zero running back, if I'm in position, say 9 through 12, and I can go get Garrett and Puka back to back, I'll go, okay, we're in a zero RB mode, let's go. Like, I don't want to force a strategy. I kind of let the first round dictate to me which strategy I'm going to go with.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And you mentioned one of the players that would fit into our next strategy. So Nate, I'll pass this one over to you. What is hero running back strategy? This is really what kind of evolved from zero running back, and this is a nice little compromise. So what is hero running back strategy?
Yeah. So the hero running back strategy, like defined right out the gate, it's making sure you have that one elite running back, get them early, so now you feel like you're safe in that position and you can go focus on all those other spots. So you're going to draft one of those top RBs with your first or second pick. Generally, especially in today's running back market, it's going to be in your first round, and then avoid drafting another RB until you get to that 7th round, right? You're filling every other spot, all of your flexes, your quarterback, your tight end, every other spot before you go get RB2, which sounds insane, but it actually ends up working out really well for you, and highly recommend if you're able to do that. If you've got picks 1 through 5, especially, and you can get CMC, Bijan, Brees. These are kind of the folks that we've all universally said like don't have the question marks some of those other running backs have right now.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I lean heavily on. But to Arlen's point, a lot of folks are leaning heavily on this strategy in today's world. So it just doesn't fall to you that way, and you can't really hero RB with a question mark running back as your RB1.
Yeah. And I think that's a really big reason why zero RB and hero RB became, it's the same fundamental reason why it became popular, is it started thinning out at running back of the powerful ones. And then there's just too many question marks on the ones that are there to be able to count on them through many rounds of being your guy. So much turnover of the top 10 every year happens with running back. And there is some with wide receiver too, but overall, I feel more confident that a wide receiver is within the bracket I think they are when I draft them than a running back, due to both injury and how quickly a team might move on and the story might not carry over. Kyren Williams is one of the examples of that possibility from one year to the next.
I don't know if we're going to spend any time talking about that later, but this might be a good cut right here where I just want to say, just in real talk right now, Kyren Williams has had some weird internet blowups in the last 24 hours or so, with Sean McVay saying that he's going to be out there returning punts. I would love to get your take on that, Mr. Love.
We can take a pause. We have one strategy left, and we can take a quick pause here. It's not great to hear. But I did repost from our last episode my general approach or thought of Kyren Williams today. So I did throw that out there. And it's because I still think he's the guy. So the year before last, Kyren Williams was trending to be the guy. But then he got injured and Akers was there. It just never took off for Kyren. But then he comes back the next year, and he's the weeks 1 through 3. He's returning punts. He's heavily involved. He is still their guy. And it's because he's really good at that. And then he's still their guy throughout. And then they did stop. They cut him back. They cut him back after week 3 from doing punt returns because it is more dangerous. You're throwing your top guy, and that's the idea. If they're the top guy, would they really be throwing him out there? I'm not sure. Like Antonio Brown is like a good example of someone who would take kickoffs and punts, but it was their top guy. So sometimes that happens. So I think that it means that Corum is good. Corum, like, they've been happy with him in camp, and they feel like they have the people behind him to take that risk. But I don't think it's because they think of them as equals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're just willing to take the risk to allow him to do something that he's good at because they have Corum right behind him, who, if he gets injured, Corum can step up, and they feel like they didn't have that last year.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. But again, I'm really curious to see how that situation itself unfolds. Selfish and selflessly. I just want to know in general, because I'm curious how that's going to go.
Yeah. I just wanted to get a panic meter for you on a couple players, and I think you're right. I don't think there was a ton of reason to panic, but I'd just love to get your reactions on players that you have on your dynasty team. So calling that out. We'll talk about the other situation at a later time.
All right. So hero wide receiver strategy. When you were talking about before of like, depends on where you're drafting in and how that first round goes. I think this is really where I also determine if I'm picking more of the hero wide receiver, going with a hero wide receiver strategy or the hero running back strategy, because I do favor one of those most times. And I would also add in, this is kind of the same situation for in Superflex, you might have the same approach, but a hero quarterback strategy. So I think for either of those, it really depends on how that first round starts off. But what is a hero wide receiver strategy? Short and simple, because we already explained the other. It's when you really secure one of the top 4 or so And I think it might even go further. Like I think with running backs, it's top 3 or 4. With wide receivers, you might get top 6 if it's really dried up on the running back of the top tier. I think there's a larger top tier for wide receiver that you could argue could jump to that top for this year. So I think that approach is like palatable, especially if you're going that route. Most likely, you are at the end of the first round or middle to end, and you'll be getting one of the second tier running backs on the way back, and that's the plan there. So hero wide receiver, you want to secure your top elite wide receiver early, come back around, get one of the top running backs, and then if you swoop back around, you can get another really good running back right away. So, for example, you might be going for a let's say a lot of the running backs go, and you get an AJ Brown or Justin Jefferson, Chase, St. Brown, those kind of players, even not even the top ones. You get one of those guys that you can have as a cornerstone, and you can come back around, get possibly a Bijan or a Gibbs if you're towards that really end of it, or an ETN, Jonathan Taylor. And then as you swing back around again, you've got our guy that we just talked about, Kyron Williams, Josh Jacobs. So you have that option there if it falls right, or at Chan, I think pushes a little bit further, where you can get 2 great running backs, but a really good wide receiver. And then you see how that plays out for the rest of the board. If you want to keep going running back, or if you want to add in the tight end or quarterback situation. I feel, and I think this is the main difference for me between hero running back and hero wide receiver, is I feel that when I go hero wide receiver, I'm more okay with jumping on one of the top tight end or quarterbacks compared to if I went running back, because I have a couple of the middle tier already, or that second tier of running back, where I feel like now I could just jump in and get one of the others, and there's plenty of wide receivers that I love in round 7.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, right? Like wide receiver is so much deeper that I can see this being a super viable strategy, because I can stack in even a third running back plus my tight end and quarterback before I come back to the wide receiver position, because I'm looking just at current ADP right now. Like if I bounce in the 5th round, you're around pick 48 in a 12 team. Or a little bit later, right? So you still got like Amari Cooper's back there. You've got George Pickens if you're comfortable going that route. Zay Flowers. So some of these guys are some of the top guys for their teams, and that's going to be your wide receiver too, right? So you got a little bit more room to play with the hero wide receiver strategy, and I feel like this specific strategy, once you grab your top wide receiver and you got your 2 running backs, which I think is probably the position across the board that you're going to be most worried about anyway. Once you've got 2 running backs that you feel comfortable with, now you can just kind of let the board come to you. Like, go grab your guys, have fun with it, because you've got the kind of positions you're really concerned about locked in, right? Top wide receiver, my RB1 and RB2 are locked in. Now I can mess around a little bit.
I definitely panic more with 0 running back and hero running back. I have more panics in the middle rounds. And I think at the end, I guess the part of it is picking your strategy is also what's going to make you tilt less and be a little bit more solid. Because I think the difference between tilt and being flexible is the anxiety and panic that's inserted in tilting, because you're doing the same thing, but one's not doing it the right way or for the right reasons. So I think nothing makes me more comfortable than the hero wide receiver strategy.
Yeah. The hero running back situation, because you absolutely have to hit your RB2. Like whoever you decide that guy is in round 6 to round 7, whether it's David Montgomery, whether it's Devin Singletary, if DeAndre Swift falls to you, like whoever the RB2 is going to be, if you miss, you just punted that position completely. So it's one of those things where like if you're locked in and okay with knowing who that's going to be, and maybe it's Brian Robinson, whoever ends up being your second running back, it's a lot easier to hit on the second wide receiver than it is on the second running back when you're waiting that long.
Well, those have been our strategies, the community strategies, and going over and our approaches to it, our tips and tricks for it. We wish you the best of luck, and please wish us the best of luck, and have us be flexible and not tilting this weekend as we go into many drafts together and against each other this weekend. Some of which we might look at recording and throwing out there, but we'll see. We'll let you know. Nate, as always, it's a pleasure, man. It's and oh yeah, do the whole like and subscribe thing. Remember, 100. We're trying to get to 100. Let's get there.
Yeah,
Hopefully
y'all,
this
you gotta
video
like,
helped you.
you're watching the videos, you see in the shorts, whatever it is, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. You don't have to love us. You just tolerate us. Let us be on your feed. Come hear from us every once in a while, right? Come
And
argue talk to us. Just love us a little bit. Nah, but y'all just love us a little bit. You know what I'm saying? No, just go ahead and hit that like and subscribe. We're here for you. We'd love to interact with you. So yeah, please, 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 if you even liked one iota of what we've had to say, or you want to just light us up, either way, like and subscribe.
Dude, you're gonna kill me. I didn't hit record. Just kidding. Have a great week.